Yeah. So I would like to, shed a little bit of insight into that. So to begin with, let us understand we have the primary quality of humility, which is a very important quality to develop in spiritual life. And this humility manifests in secondary qualities like tolerance, patience, respect, and also forgiveness. We can see them as secondary qualities of humility. Because it's quite easy to say, oh yeah, look, I'm so humble. Yeah, humble. But then it really shows how humble we are, in situations where we have to be forgiving, right? Or where we have to be tolerant or respectful or patient, then it really shows how humble we are, that we cannot fake too easily, Yes. So it's interesting to understand how these things are all connected on the subtle platform there, And there is a nice statement which I would like to share with you. This comes from our previous Acharya Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He wrote in the book Chaitanya Shikshamrita, he makes the following statement. He says, giving up the desire to punish a person for committing an offense, that is called forgiveness or tolerance. So there's two interesting points in this one sentence. First of all, the subtlety, what is behind forgiving, that we, when we give up this desire to punish a person, to do something nasty back to them, what they have done to us, So if we give up that desire, that actually means to forgive. When we don't want to take revenge and retaliate, because that's happening on the subtle platform, even if it never manifests, even if we don't do anything nasty back to them, but just to hang on to this desire of doing something nasty back to them, as long as we hang on to that, we actually can't forgive. And forgiving means that we give up that right or that desire to do something bad to them, right? So that's the first interesting understanding, because, we may have never thought about this, what forgiving is, that this is what it is, to give up the desire to get back at a person for something, nasty they did to us. This may have never occurred to us, right? Yes. And then the second amazing point in that one sentence is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, so giving up that right to punish a person is called forgiveness or tolerance. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur almost, equates, tolerance with forgiveness. It's called tolerance or forgiveness or tolerance. So in other words, there is a very close connection between tolerance and the ability to forgive. It is actually based on the ability to tolerate. Another interesting point, which we may have never thought about, right? So now tolerance, I want to use the first, 10, 15 minutes here of our discussion on discussing what tolerance is. And then I would like to read some forgiveness meditations from one book which I have published. It's called The False Ego, Our Constant Companion and Troublemaker. There's a whole chapter on forgiveness. And I find this quite helpful, to go through a few statements there, just to imbibe the mood of forgiving. And then hopefully this will help us to cultivate forgiveness. Right? So tolerance, let us first have a look at tolerance. So tolerance also is a very important quality to cultivate on the path of bhakti. And we can almost say it's a sign, a criteria of how advanced and spiritually strong a person is, and how tolerant that person can be. Yeah. Because tolerance, what does it mean? It means the false ego is already a little subdued and dissolved, because it is actually the false ego which rebels and protests. Oh, I'm not going to tolerate this. It's actually the false ego. So, and if we want to get out of this material world, we have to dissolve the false ego, and we have to transform the subtle body of mind, intelligence, false ego has to be fully spiritualized. So if a person has developed some tolerance, it means he or she has already done some internal work to subdue and quieten down the false ego's demands. So that means that person is closer in developing bhakti and going back to Godhead. So that's why it is a direct criteria, how spiritually strong and advanced a person is. And we have the famous examples in our scriptures, Haridas Thakur, Prahlad Maharaj, so tolerant. Oh, they're the embodiment of tolerance, And when Prahlad Maharaj was offered a benediction by Lord Nrsimhadev after Lord Nrsimhadev killed Hiranyakashipu, very easily he could have said, oh, let my father suffer in hell for all what he has done to me, that would be the common reaction. But no, Prahlad Maharaj said, please, may he be forgiven for the offenses he did. That was his concern. May he be forgiven. Wow, that's a high level of tolerance. Yes. So compassionate. Yes, not wanting to retaliate and do something nasty back to him. So now, of course, there's another interesting point in Bhagavad Gita 269. It says, what is day to the common person is night to the introspective sage. And what is day for the saintly person is night to everyone else. So in other words, the worldview of a materialist, of a spiritualist, they're very different as days from night. So, and that means what is success in material life, what is it seen with spiritual vision? But success in material life is what in spiritual life? Death. Yeah, well, you can say, well, let's not say it so strong, but it may most likely be an obstacle, an impediment, right? Yes. So success in material life, path to success is showing off, pushing yourself to the front. Here, I'm the center of attention. That's usually the path to success in the material world. But that tendency, that mentality is an obstacle on the path of bhakti. We have to give up this mentality of pushing ourselves to the front and in the same way, what is success in bhakti, what will that be seen from mundane vision? Huh? What's that? What? Obstacle? Well, it means it's seen as weakness, as being a loser, right? Yes. And tolerance is the perfect example for this. Tolerance is such an important quality in spiritual life, but with mundane vision, what? Forget it. Who am I to tolerate this nonsense? No, I'm not going to tolerate. They're standing up and defending and fighting for yourself. That's seen as success. Yeah. So that's how opposite material life, spiritual life are. So very important to keep this in the back of our minds, because very easily, if we don't understand this, then we may invite all kinds of so-called modern progressive trends into our spiritual practice, not realizing that this may very well create an obstacle. Yeah. So we have to be very mindful of this day-night thing. It actually, this day-night principle accompanies us through all aspects of life, actually. Yes, there's so many other examples, but I don't want to get into this. Prabhu, you came a little later. You're comfortable with me speaking English? You can understand? Yes? Otherwise, there is also some German translation there. Okay, good. Yeah, I wouldn't want you to sit there and not understand. And also sometimes people are a little upset. They think, we are in Germany here. What is this? Everything is in English. Yes, but yeah, I'm happy that you allow me to speak in English. Yeah, so tolerance, is the highest in spiritual life, becomes the lowest in material life. Yes. So I would like to read also a few strong statements, just a couple, what tolerance is. In Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1848, it says, the devotees of the Lord are so forbearing, which is another word for tolerant, that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Wow, that's a pretty high level of tolerance, right? Yes, no matter how you are mistreated in some way, Vaishnav heart will not want to retaliate and punish the person back. So let's have a look. Even though we are defamed, when somebody spoils our reputation, when our fame is damaged, this is a challenge for the false ego. What is everybody thinking of me? What are they thinking now? And especially if it is unfair, in an unfair way, our fame and reputation is damaged. This is a challenge for the false ego. So to tolerate that, this is tolerance. Or when we are cheated, again, false ego crying for justice, fairness, that person should be punished. Often we see this when some crime happened, somebody got killed, murdered, often the relatives can only find some kind of peace if the murderer is locked up for 30 years in jail, then they get that satisfaction of him being punished. It's actually the false ego that demands that, Yes. And saying this doesn't mean that murderers shouldn't be punished or something. That's a different story, of course. We want to, live according to the law. But nevertheless, when we cannot find peace and then we are lacking tolerance. False ego protests. Or when we are neglected, to be neglected, ignored, it's also painful for the false ego. And people, don't give us any attention at all, and they're very neglectful. Or when we are insulted, that's another one, difficult to tolerate for the false ego. So there's another nice statement in the 11th canto in the Bhagavatam. Tolerance means to patiently endure unhappiness, such as that provoked by the insults or negligence of others. So that's what tolerance is, when we patiently endure such kind of unhappiness and pain, and that's tolerance. So now, of course, very commonly people say, well, but how much can we tolerate? Or people say, when I tolerate, all this negativity builds up in me and I get all sick and sooner or later I explode, and so these comments we often get. So let us understand the difference between true tolerance and simply suppressing things. So usually what we think is tolerance is actually not tolerance. We are simply suppressing. Yeah. And suppressing anything does not offer the solution. Doesn't matter what we try and suppress, desires, whatever material desires for sense gratification. Just to suppress is not the answer. That will not lead to purification. So very commonly, what we think is tolerance is actually simply suppressing. And when we suppress, externally, we try and shut up, we are not complaining, but internally, the false ego battle continues. The false ego rebels. The false ego whispers into our ear, they shouldn't treat you like this. Who are you to tolerate this? You have to say something. You have to defend yourself. So the whole false ego complaint and rebelling continues. And that's when the negativity inside builds up, and we may get sick or we may explode because it is building up. But that we cannot call tolerance. It's actually simply suppressing. So true tolerance is something different. It requires some internal work. And I would like to quickly highlight 2 tools we need to have to actually cultivate true tolerance. See, my humble preaching efforts are always very practical. I'm trying to, give the practical application of what Prabhupada teaches us in the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. How do we live it practically? So this is a very useful discussion. So the 2 tools to cultivate true tolerance. Tool number 1 is that we have this mood, actually, I deserve so much worse. But Krishna is so kind, he gives me only 1 little drop of what I really deserve. And I must have done something nasty to this person, either in this life or in the last life. So now I'm getting it back, and actually I deserve much worse. I've been a rascal for so many lifetimes, you know. So that is tool number one. And who can understand what kind of quality we need to have that mood? We mentioned it already a little bit, but just to take it up again. Exactly. We need some little humility to have this mood that actually I deserve worse. Krishna is very kind to me. He's only giving me a little thing. And at least I'm still alive, you know. So it could be worse, you know. So that requires a little bit of humility. A proud person would never have that approach. A proud person would say, hey, don't they know who I am? I've been in Krishna consciousness for 40 years. I've done so much service. I've given such big donations. How can they treat me like this? You know? So that would be the proud reaction. They don't know who I am, you know? So, but the humble reaction would be, I deserve worse than this. So humility, at least some little humility we need. And then the second tool is that we see in every situation we face, we see Krishna's hand in the picture. We ask ourselves, what is Krishna trying to teach me? There must be some reason why he is putting me in this situation. After all, not a blade of grass is moving without him being in control. So there must be some reason that I'm facing this. What is he trying to teach me? Yeah, this is a very important approach. Usually we can very easily see Krishna's hand in the picture when everything goes according to our plans, when our mind and senses are satisfied and pleased, then of course it's all Krishna's arrangement. But when things are challenging, then very often we cannot even see Krishna's hand in the picture. We cannot see. But that actually is what it means to be Krishna conscious, that we can connect whatever situation we are facing in life with Krishna's hand in the picture, seeing it as Krishna's mercy. He is trying to give me some lesson here, right? Yeah. So now my question to you, what do we have to have that approach? To see Krishna's hand in the picture. Let me first see if anybody else wants to say something. What does it require? What do we... Huh?
Complete surrender. She said gratefulness.
Gratitude. Also, complete surrender. Yeah, we're getting closer. Knowledge. Clean heart, it's all true. Love towards Krishna. It's all true, but now what do we need to have? Yes, who said it? Yes, we need unflinching faith. Yes, we need faith in Krishna. You know, then it doesn't matter what we face, we will not be shaken. We will not be bewildered. You know, even if so many things happen to us. We will never walk out and give up Krishna consciousness. If we have faith in Krishna, faith in Srila Prabhupada, yes, so important. If we have faith in Srila Prabhupada, doesn't matter what is happening in ISKCON, and there's always something happening in ISKCON, but if we have faith in Prabhupada, we will never leave ISKCON. We will stick with it, you know. But if we don't have strong faith, sooner or later Krishna will test us. Krishna tests us all the time, you know, because in order to purify our heart, he has to, you know, dig deep to get the subtle anarthas, the subtle unwanted qualities there, to purify them from the heart. here the tests become more and more heavy as we become more senior, because the contamination is more subtle. So without strong faith in Krishna, we may not survive the tests, and we may just get offended. No, forget it. These Hare Krishnas, this ISKCON is useless. I'm never going to go there again. Yes. So these are the two tools to cultivate true tolerance, to have a little bit of humility and to have some faith in Krishna and seeing his hand in the picture. So it requires some internal work, some cultivation. We may not be able to really, apply these tools immediately from one day to the other. So it is a question of cultivation. And with all these subtle internal work, we need the help of a mentor, a coach, or in India we say a counselor. Here in the Western world, counselor is more somebody who helps us as a therapy, with some mental issues. Then we have a counselor. But yeah, depending on where we live in the world, we use different terms. So either mentor or coach. I mean, even in the professional world, people understand that we need a coach, right? The other day I spoke to a nurse and she said, oh yeah, my coach in the hospital. And I thought, just see, even a nurse has a coach, or sports people have a coach, or business people. Anybody who wants success in life should have a coach who is already more successful than he is, right? Yeah. And in spiritual life also, just having guru is not quite enough, because our gurus have sometimes hundreds and thousands of disciples. They're not always there to see our practical situation in life. So we need this more experienced, well-wishing friend who guides us, who helps us to move forward. Very important. And especially all these topics which are connected with the false ego, because the false ego blocks our ears, blocks our intelligence. We can't hear, we can't see and understand. So we need this well-wishing friend who just says, hey, relax, just cool down a bit. He or she didn't mean it like that. Just calm down your false ego a bit and so on. If we don't have such a well-wishing friend in our life who has no other interest except my spiritual growth and development, then very easily, and I see this happening all over the world, there's some misunderstanding, some little conflict, and we don't have this well-wishing friend to take shelter of, then we take shelter of our false ego. We get offended and we walk out. We have all grudges and bitter feelings in the heart. And sometimes we are never seen again, disappear. Unfortunately, this happens a lot. So yeah, that gives us some idea what true tolerance is. We need some little humility to see Krishna is very kind. He gives us only one drop of what we really deserve. And we have to have that faith in Krishna, that yes, Krishna has some reason why this happens in my life. There is no chances. There is some reason. And yeah, when you apply these tools, you will realize, yes, Krishna knows. Krishna knows my sore points. And Krishna knows where I have to work on myself. And here we go again. He puts me in the situation where I have to introspect and reflect. Yes. So we learn to see how Krishna actually helps us to, work through all these anarthas and bad qualities and all that. Yes. So as we cultivate true tolerance, then we can also be more forgiving. Then we can let go of this right to punish you for what you did to me. When we see Krishna's hand in the picture, when we have the mood, yes, I deserve worse, then we can just let it go. Yes, Krishna arranged this to teach me something here. And if nothing else, we can see what Krishna teaches us. Well, it's tolerance. Very often Krishna puts us into these challenging situations to teach us tolerance. Yeah. So one little thing which often comes up and which I do want to also clarify, that sometimes people say, well, what about abuse, domestic violence? Do we just tolerate that? No. The whole topic of tolerance, we cannot use tolerance to justify domestic violence and abuse. Yes, we cannot do that. So if a person finds themselves in an abusive and violent situation, again, we need a counselor, a mentor, where we can reveal our heart, and that person should take action, even for the person's sake who commits the abuse and violence, because we get some reactions. It's a Vaishnava apparat, so even for that sake, we have to try and stop this, because the person damages his own spiritual development, apart from the fact of causing so much pain and trauma to another person. So yeah, I like to always clarify this, that we cannot use this topic of tolerance to justify domestic violence or abuse or something, just to make that clear. Maybe before we turn to this forgiveness meditations, let me see if we just maybe have one little question about this topic of tolerance. Is there something which anybody wants to ask to clarify this a little further? Or is it all pretty clear? Yes,
You said that one has one positive thing. If I'm confronted with suffering, and I think, oh, I deserve even more.
Yeah.
But one could argue that isn't that such a negative thought about oneself? I'm so bad. I'm such a bad person. I deserve so much punishment. Why not think positive?
Well, see the positive. Yeah, I'll let him translate first. Yeah, so it leads to positiveness if we use that in order to more seriously take shelter of the process of Krishna consciousness. That we regret all our nonsense we've been doing and realizing, I've been a rascal, I committed sinful activities, I was eating cow's meat and so many other things, and I did harm to so many people. So now let me put an end to this by becoming a serious devotee and purify my heart, And then in that negativity, it should lead to a positiveness, But if we drown ourselves in shame and guilt feelings and all that, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so useless, I have no hope, that is the mundane way, because Krishna is not in the picture, and we still keep ourselves in the center, and we go in circles around ourselves, some kind of self-pity and self-indulgence, and that will lead to depression and suicidal and. But no, if we move Krishna in the picture, I'm a rascal. I've done so many horrible things. Now let me put an end to this. And thank God Prabhupada came into my life and I can rectify myself and I want to get out of here and make this life my last life. So then it becomes empowering and uplifting. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Yes.
I always, when I hear, thank you very much, first of all, for the lecture. Whenever I hear people talk about tolerance, I always get the feeling of what you said before is that there is some element of still biting on your teeth and like, oh, okay, I'm shanti, I have to just tolerate it. So, what would you say is the difference between tolerance and acceptance? Because acceptance is like, for me, okay, it is like it is, and there's no resistance in me. I just accept it like it is. But tolerance is still that little tiny bit of false ego of.
No, see, when the false ego still rebels, we are not quite there yet in true tolerance. And as I said, it's a gradual process. So, but it simply means the false ego is still rebelling, and we just, okay, I tolerate, I bite my teeth and my tongue, and I'm not going to say anything. But that's not the true tolerance. But true tolerance leads to acceptance, if it's truly, and it may take some time, it may take 1 or 2 years, to actually get to the point. But at least we have a map, we have a path how to get there and how to do this internal work, of having this already. You can try and apply this when you look at situations where you find it difficult to tolerate. So when as soon as you have this mood, actually I deserve worse. Krishna only gave me one drop. And what is Krishna trying to tell me? He must be teaching me something. Just that thought and approach already quietens the false ego down, right? And it may still try and rebel and protest, but it quietens it down, And as we become habituated in approaching things in that mood, we will see we become more and more strong in cultivating those tools. And then we can very easily let go and move on and say, yeah, well, I do deserve worse. And Krishna is so merciful in teaching me a good lesson here, So it's a question of cultivation, yeah. But when the false ego is still, so it means we haven't dissolved the false ego enough yet. And it's a lifetime project to dissolve the false ego. I dare say for many of us, it's over several lifetimes, so we can't expect here the quick big results or something, but good to know. I find these subtle things very interesting and fascinating, how it is all connected. And yes, Majid.
So I may be able to forgive, but I cannot forget.
Mm.
Is that real forgiveness or is it not complete?
Let's read the forgiveness meditations, because exactly that comes in, or I can answer also, and then we skip that meditation. We often say forget and forgive, but no, don't forget. No. We remember, and we better remember, otherwise maybe we give opportunity to the other person to again somehow take advantage of us. Oh, no, we do remember, but we remember with a different feeling. We remember without the bitterness, without the pain. Maybe we can even smile about it, saying, oh, yeah, I remember that situation, after a year or whatever. So we still remember, but forgiveness changes the quality of remembrance. That's what it is. When we forgive, we remember without that pain and bitterness. That's what it is. But we do remember, and it's better to remember. But maybe some little details. Oh yeah, gee, yeah, that happened. I had forgotten about it already. That can also be, But yeah, it's not necessarily that we have to forget, and sometimes it's good not to forget. Because maybe there's also a lesson for us in there. Maybe we contributed that other people, had that opportunity to give us pain. We trusted people more than we should have trusted them. So good to remember, But it changes, forgiveness changes the kind of remembrance, the quality of the remembrance. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. It's 2:45. If you want me to finish at 3, let me read at least a few of these forgiveness meditations, and let's see if we have after that some time for more questions. So, I'm sure we all know Nelson Mandela, right? The freedom fighter in South Africa. He was imprisoned for quite a few years. So he says, as I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, meaning leaving the prison, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I would still be in prison. Yes, we may be so-called free, but if we don't leave our hatred and bitterness behind, then that will imprison us. It will keep us bound up, right? Yeah. The truth is, unless we let go, unless we forgive ourselves, that can also be a challenge, to forgive ourselves. We may have done a really big blunder, some foolish mistake, which ruins our whole reputation. So then the false ego whispers into our ear, how could you do this? Just see, my God, you were such a strong and pure devotee. How could you fall down or whatever? So, and it may be difficult to forgive ourselves, because the ego constantly whispers these things in our ear. Again, if we use the two tools, it could have been worse. At least I'm still alive. I'm still with the devotees, And what is Krishna trying to teach me? Maybe I was getting too puffed up and overconfident, thinking I'm such a pure devotee. So maybe he had to smash my pride a bit, make me more humble. So, if we see things in with these eyes, then we learn to forgive ourselves, right? Yes, we do. So let's go back. The truth is, unless we let go, unless we forgive ourselves, unless we forgive the situation and others around us, unless we realize the situation is over, it's done, it's in the past, unless we realize all that, we cannot move forward. Yes, we are stuck. And again, very helpful if we have this well-wishing friend who can help us to realize, to accept, to do this internal work, and because otherwise very easily we keep the grudges for 20, 30 years, or we fade away and we will, never be seen again. Forgiveness is not only something we do for other people, we also do it for ourselves to get well and move on. Forgiveness does not excuse their behavior. That's also what we often think, that if I forgive you, you are excused. No, you're not excused. But forgiveness prevents our behavior from it prevents their behavior from destroying our heart. That's what forgiveness does. You know? Yes. It's not that we let them off the hook and their excuse, but no, by forgiving, we stop their behavior from destroying our heart. We let go. That's what forgiveness is all about. Yeah. Maybe it is not always about trying to fix something broken. Maybe it is about starting over and creating something better. Forgiveness is when I give up my right to hurt you for hurting me. That's basically the same what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. It is not about letting someone off the hook for their actions, but it is about freeing ourselves of negative energies that bind us to them. Right? Yes, that's we cut this negative energy that binds us to them. That's what forgiveness does. You know, it frees us from them. Yeah, from that. Here it comes. Forgiveness does not erase the bitter past. A healed memory is not a deleted memory. You know? Yes. So we don't necessarily have to forget. If we forget, okay, good. But yeah, no, it's not a deleted memory. Instead, forgiving what we cannot forget creates a new way to remember. That's what it does. Without pain, without bitterness, without this revengeful feeling in the heart. You know? Yes. Yes. We change the memory of our past into a hope for our future. Relationships get stronger when both are willing to understand mistakes and forgive each other. Very important also in family life, you know. We have to learn to forgive each other and to understand our mistakes. We can offer a prayer. My dear Lord, if I hurt others, give me the strength to apologize. And if people hurt me, give me the strength to forgive. So what do you think is more difficult, to apologize or to forgive? Yeah. It takes a strong person to say sorry and an even stronger person to forgive. Sometimes even when we should or want to apologize, even there is that ego battle. No, the other person should apologize. Actually, it's their fault. I'm not going to apologize. I'll wait for the other person. You know? And nobody wants to be the first one. Or we say, oh, I'm really sorry, but actually, you know, and blah, you know. So then we are only offering lip service. Deep down in our heart, we are actually not sorry. You know, we just say it and we come with all the accusations and justifications and all that. You know. Forgive is not always easy. At times it feels more painful than the wound we suffered to forgive the one that inflicted it. And yet there is no peace without forgiveness. Yeah. When we forgive, we heal. When we let go, we grow. It rhymes. Forgiveness is about recognizing that staying resentful creates an active echo of the pain the offender caused. That's also a good way to express it, you know, that we don't forgive, and then that creates an active echo in our heart. It keeps that offense alive. By saying that the awful offense the offender did is beyond forgiveness, we give them the power to keep their offense alive in our heart. We give the offender continued power over us. That's what actually happens, on the subtle level. Yes. So good to understand this, that the main thing, to cultivate forgiveness is actually for our own benefit, that we heal, that we let go of the pain we experience, and that we can move on. Otherwise, very easily we're stuck. Yeah. And as we said, forgiveness is based on the ability to tolerate. This may be a new perspective for some of us. Our forgiveness and tolerance are actually connected. And tolerance, we need the two tools of what? Humility and faith in Krishna. Yeah. So, that gives us some very practical tools to do some internal work and cultivate true tolerance and thus forgiveness, right? So since it is already 3:05, I would like to quickly take this opportunity to show you the books I published, that maybe some of you may feel inspired to get some, because they're all very relevant, interesting, practical topics. The topics of practical application. How do we apply it? How do we live it? So we have Spiritual Culture, Krishna's Divine System. I have this book in Russian also and in English language. This is a very interesting book. It's actually all about women. We women have a very powerful energy, very powerful Shakti. A woman can bring the very best out of a man and help him to come to reach his highest level of performance, spiritually and materially. Or she can use that energy to destroy a man. That's the power of a woman. Yes. So any woman who wants to have harmonious relationships in her life with men, not only in family life, even at work, in the office, or wherever, yes, please check out this book. And every man who wants to get the empowerment and support of a woman, also please check it out. Very helpful for married life. And indeed, it has saved already quite a few marriages. I get these letters, these emails, where people share this, that they almost were filing the divorce. Then a friend of them gave them the book. They thought, okay, let's try it one more time. And they're still married. And the men always love this book. They always say, finally, somebody understands how the man's heart is ticking. So then we have Sheltering Relationships. I also have that book in Russian and English. That's about the importance of having a counselor, a mentor. We touched upon it. When we read this book, we will be convinced that without having such a well-wishing friend and eventually becoming such a well-wishing friend to other devotees, we actually cannot make advancement. Yes, very important and crucial topic. And there's also the topic of envy in the book, how envy manifests towards seniors equals juniors. So many interesting things. Then we have the false ego, our constant companion and troublemaker. I have this book also in Russian and English. Very insightful. There's so many other things in there too, but tolerance, forgiveness, and so many more topics, so many practical steps how to do this internal work. And there's a whole chapter on chanting the holy name in japa and in kirtan, how to chant so we can actually receive that power and mercy which is available through the chanting. Very, very nice. So then we have entering the Grihastha ashram. This is a handbook for matchmaking. Yes, you know, even in India now, people still have the idea of matchmaking, but often people only look at caste and money and nothing else. You know, so in this book you find over 200 topics which a boy and a girl or man and woman should discuss with a cool head, without pink glasses. That's why I made it pink, because the pink glasses, when we all lovey-dovey, that you know, we spoils our vision. We can't see what we get ourselves into, and then 2 years later the pink glasses fade away, and then, oh my God, why did I marry this person? You know? So it's a good book for people who are not married yet, or for parents or counselors, mentors who want to help others to find a compatible partner. Then we have Family Life as an Ashram, Secrets of Success. How to create this culture of bhakti in our home life. Very important, because if that culture of bhakti is there, then the children very naturally grow into Krishna consciousness. But if the culture is not there and it's just by rules and regulations, the kids, as soon as they're 15, 16, they walk out, they don't want to know about Krishna consciousness. So very practical, so many interesting elements are there. How to spiritualize our home life. Yeah. And last but not least, the Vanapasta Ashram, meeting death with joy. Actually, the last 2 days we had a seminar here. We had our last session this morning. Vanapasta Ashram is that phase in life when the kids are grown up and established in the world, then the parents are meant to move on to the next phase, to again get more deeply absorbed in spiritual life, to simplify life, to accept a bit more austere conditions, to get out of the cozy home and go here, go there, spend some time in the holy Dham, visit other temples, do some deeper studies, and. And that is all meant to help us to prepare death, to meet death with joy. And there is a whole big chapter on death. What happens, you know, how all the subtle things, what is taking place there, how to overcome the level of pain when we face death, and so many interesting things, how to prepare and how to support others. Sterbehilfe, we call this in German. Yeah. So very important topic, because our parents are leaving, our senior devotees are leaving, sooner or later we are leaving. We have to know. And I had the good fortune, I have accompanied quite a few personalities in this last 1-2 weeks. My own parents, with both of my parents, I managed to catch the moment. I parked all my preaching, flew back to Germany. I was there, I kept them at home, not in the hospital. I helped them to focus. Both my parents had an amazing departure. So all our life, we need good association. And especially when it comes to meeting death, we need some good association who helps us focus. Otherwise, we may very well be lost, you know. So that's the topic of this book. So if anybody would like to get some books, the last 4 books are 15 euros each, and the first 2 are 10 euros each. Doesn't matter in which language, Russian or English. So if anybody wants some books, then you please can meet me there at this table. I will hang around there, and then we will work things out. Okay, so thank you so much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki, Vedanta ki, Golokadam ki, Gaura Premanandi. Hare Hare Krishna.